Hello everybody. So you want to write a book, a novel, fiction. Brilliant. Let's not worry about why you want to write. Perhaps like me, you've got something itching in your mind for decades. Maybe you have the time. Maybe you're lonely, sitting in a coffee shop, like J.K. Rowling, escaping a miserable life. Or, like Mary Shelley, it was a rainy afternoon and she and her family companions had nothing to do. So they held a competition to decide who could write the best book. The result was Frankenstein. Never mind the reason. You have a story to tell and it needs to get out. And you want people to read it. After all, it's your creation. It's unique. Indeed, that's the truly wonderful, beautiful thing about the creation of a story. It's fresh. It's yours. And no one can interfere. Well, of course they can. Your editor and your agent, if you have one, I don't and I never will, and the publisher, they'll all want something completely different from what you've written. Forget them. This is your book. But before I get to the subject of this episode, a word of warning. Pay no attention whatsoever to what others advise, including me. Listen to yourself. I listened to an incredibly intimidating friend at Oxford, a man of supreme skill in the English language. And I never wrote a word for decades because I thought I'd never match up. I nearly made the same mistake when I started to write at my relatively late age. Another friend said, "Stop writing and read more." But by this time, I knew what I wanted to write. But remember, everyone who criticizes you can't write. You can. Still, you have to construct a story that in some sense works. How? Well, as in everything in life, there's some rules about what makes a successful story. Here's 10 ways to make your story succeed. I'm not going to read them all out, they're up there on the screen. But you can see you have to have characters, you have to have a plot, and you have to have some tension or some drama. Let's apply this list of rules to one of my favourite authors from my own reading list. I love detective thrillers, especially the Scandinavian noir kind of genre. And the best of these, I think, is the Wallander series, written by Henning Mankell. What makes these books work for me? You might not like them, but I'm going to say what makes them work for myself. The character is so compelling that Kurt Wallander has been played on TV by several top actors, most famously by Kenneth Branagh. Wallander appears first in the book Faceless Killers. He's a middle-aged senior police officer. His life is in a mess. His wife's left him, his father's senile. He eats badly, drinks alone, and he can be a pain in the ass. The place, the world that Mankell constructed for his character, Kurt Wallander. It's the wintry landscape of Sweden, a place that frankly never interested me very much, but which Mankell examines through Wallander's tired, cynical eyes. It can be depressing, but you feel you want to be snug in front of the fire, cuddled up with a nice brandy. The plot, the mystery. Usually, in the case of the Wallander detective books, it's a dramatically grotesque killing, murder. But the violence is not gratuitous. For Mankell, there's always a political or a social message. In The Dogs of Riga, 2 men are found shot to death floating in a boat. The plot looks at the geopolitics at the end of the Cold War. In The Fifth Woman, 4 nuns and a 5th woman are killed in a savage nighttime attack in Africa. Mankell loved Africa, and he hated the xenophobia that he thought he found in Sweden. He created Wallander because he wanted to write passionately about Swedish society, and in particular about racism. He was a man with a message. How about subplots? There's always more than one murder to solve. But Wallander grapples with his depression, his anger at his father, his divorce, and his relationship with his daughter and his colleagues. The writing is intensely human, emotional, and dramatic. Ultimately, Kurt Wallander, becomes somebody that you know personally. All of that said, Mankell never forgets his skill and craft as a writer. His stories and his plots work, and I've put a full list of his books linked in details below. You may remember I opined on the subject of stories and why they're important to humans in an earlier episode. In 2004, Christopher Booker, a journalist, literary critic, and an author, wrote The 7 Basic Plots, Why We Tell Stories. All 786 pages. Goodreads blurb says, I'll quote, "This remarkable and monumental book provides a comprehensive answer to the age-old riddle of whether there are only a small number of basic stories in the world." End quote. What are Booker's 7 plots? Here's the list. Let's try and apply them to the Wallander series. Well, he overcomes human monsters and confronts many social issues. And he has a deeply flawed character, and that often makes matters worse. There's no transformation, but at the end of the series, Wallander, now retired, reflects on his life. In the end, spoiler alert, I found the series to be a tragic record of a man struggling to live a decent life within a society he doesn't recognise or understand, and to live with his own demons. Henning Mankell, writing the story of his character Kurt Wallander, goes beyond the simple genre of detective fiction to reach the heights of what literature is really about. Reflections on humanity. I'm not going to let you go before mentioning my approach to my stories. My books fit into several of these categories. The idea of disappearing through a gateway and going into a maze. That's Booker's number 3, Quest. Booker's number 4, Voyages and Return. Comedy. Booker number 5. I try to introduce some irony, if not outright laughs. I don't think I'm a great comedian. There's a farce at the end of Rivers of Aid, and at least I find that amusing. And there are elements of tragedy. Booker's number 6. I write about Alan Turing's death, about the tragic defeat of the British Army of Kabul in January of 1842. And I write about human trafficking in Cambodia in the present day. I might be a bit preachy, as one critic has said. But why do you think Dickens was writing about the working class in London? And for sure, Kurt Wallander, opines enough about the world's ills. Give me a break. I didn't plan this approach. Somehow, the stories tell themselves. They come to me, often when I'm asleep. But I'm pleased that somehow I've managed to fit into Booker's framework, even by accident. How do you tackle your writing? Is it meticulously planned, with a plot, a worldview, and characters set before you even start writing? Have you lived your characters for years, as J.K. Rowling says she did, until their voices become so loud that they have to get out? Or do you just sit down and let the characters speak for themselves, live their lives, speak to you in dreams, and lead you where their stories go? Let me know. I enjoy any feedback. There we are. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, give me a like, subscribe, and see you next time.